Welcome back to the Communication Mastery Podcast with me, Mark Berlinson. This is where we unleash the power of understanding to build bridges between people and break down the boxes that keep us apart, because we understand that communication is the oxygen of teamwork and it's the soil in which teamwork grows and bears fruit. So we want to grow our communication mastery together, and that's what we're here for. This episode, I want to talk a little bit about the benefits of retaking your communication profile. I get this question quite a lot. This is not really a question and response episode, but I guess it is a response to the question I've been asked a few times recently. When should I retake my profile? Because remember, the profile is a snapshot of you at the time that you answer the questions, and it's also a reflection of your understanding of yourself in response to those questions. And so generally we recommend that you retake your profile every 18 months to 2 years, because I hope you're not the same 2 years' time than you are today. I'm sure you're not the same today as you were just a couple of years ago. So it's helpful to take another snapshot of yourself to see what you can learn. Another time to retake your profile is if you've had some kind of major life event. Maybe you've had a major job change, or you've relocated to a different state, or maybe you've had a lot of challenge in your family. Maybe you've gone through a bankruptcy, or there's been a bereavement, or a relationship has ended. If there's been a major life change for you, again, your communication styles will reflect that change, and it's important to understand yourself as you now are rather than as you used to be. It's interesting. All of us went through a pandemic just a few years ago, didn't we? And the number of clients who retook their profiles after the pandemic and saw how much of a difference all of that isolation of stay at home, flatten the curve, all those phrases that we were putting around at the time, that necessity to be separated from people did often bring out change in people's communication styles. When you retake your profile, the key thing is to answer the questions in the way that is what applies to you most of the time in most settings, to get as general a picture of yourself as you can, as truthful a picture of yourself as you can. So it's good to try not to bring in some specific conflict or challenge into your answers. Don't answer it in the sense of a relationship that you're struggling with. Try and see, now, how am I wired in my foundational, in my core wiring, rather than in my reaction or response to a specific situation, because that will give you a clearer picture of yourself when you retake the profile. And remember, the results from different years will differ because it is a snapshot of you at that time. But I love to say to people, although the results differ, you can see that this is still you in the uniqueness of the way your profile is put together, and in the differences between your languages, the order, the scale, and that kind of thing. So let's answer the question of, well, so how do I compare my previous profile with my current one? When I retake my profile, what should I do to compare it to get the most value from it? And the first thing to do is just to put the two side by side and ask myself, what has changed in my profile? So my one from, let's say, 18 months ago, when I maybe had just come out of a job change, versus this one from today, where basically everything's on a level and I feel like I'm in my sweet spot, or maybe it's the reverse for you. But as I put the two side by side, what has changed? Maybe my highest language is not as high as it used to be, and so there's less of a gap between my primary language and the rest. Or maybe there was a compression of languages in my previous profile where I had 3, 4, maybe even 5 languages all close together. And now they're more spread out. They're more even. There's nothing right or wrong about that. But if I misunderstand how my profile fits together, then I'm not going to be able to leverage my understanding effectively in today's communication. So what has changed? And then once I begin to identify what has changed, maybe jot down a list of, here are 3 or 4 things that stand out to me as I look at the two charts side by side. The second question to ask myself is there some specific factor that might explain that change? To give you an example, a few years ago, I had a profile where my doer language was my lowest language. And that surprised me when I got that result. And I looked at it and thought, why is it that that is the case? Because normally for me, my doer language, the one that likes to see the practical things that need doing and gets great value from checking them off of the to-do list, that's usually somewhere in the middle for me. It's not my primary overriding first language, but it is a language that I operate in very regularly, at least every day to some extent. And so as I looked at my doer language being my last language in that profile a few years ago, I realized that it was a function of a job that I just finished. Where the circumstances were that I couldn't get things finished, or I couldn't tell what I needed to complete with any certainty. There was a lot of uncertainty in that role that I was fulfilling. It wasn't that there was anything particularly wrong with that work setting. It was just that was the characteristic of the role I was fulfilling. And so it was a reflection of a season I'd just come out of that my doer language was so low. And then a year or two later, when I retook my profile, my doer was back in the middle where I believe it belongs in my particular unique wiring. Then the next thing, there may not be a specific factor that could explain a change. If you can see a change which you can't identify what the specific factor that's contributed to that change would be, then ask yourself the question, does the difference from last time tell me something about myself? So maybe your mover language has gone from being very low to in the middle of your profile. The mover language, if you remember, is an action-based language that always wants to improve the standard and stand for justice and sees things through the lens of black and white, right and wrong. And so that language is a very courageous language. And if it was very low before and now it's increased, it may have something to tell you about how your life over the last, whatever it is, 18 months, 2 years, has allowed you to become more courageous. Or maybe it's allowed you to become more bold in the way that you address issues that you identify, whether it's in yourself or with other people. The mover language is just as hard on itself as it is on those around. And so it may be that you've had to become more firm with yourself in the area of discipline. But what does the change tell you about yourself? What does the difference show you may have changed in your life? It's a reflection of how you are today compared with how you were on the previous occasion. Sometimes people ask me, what should I understand if the order of my languages has changed? If there's been a big switch around in the way that they're wired or the way that they're ordered. It would be interesting then to do the same process now as you would have done when you first got your profile, which is to label each of your languages with their intelligence category. Is this an action language? Is it a feeling language? Or is it a thinking language? And so out of the 7, you'll end up with a communication process that may go act, think, feel, act, think, feel. Was that 7? I think it was. Or it may be that your communication process is much more grouped than that. It might be feel, think, act. In which case that tells you something about yourself. You're somebody who feels first and then thinks a good deal before there's any action. Or maybe you're the other way around. Maybe it's act, then feel, and then think. And you can see that there would actually be a benefit of starting to pull up some of those thinking languages so that the other languages can benefit from the input of your thinkers. So anyway, look at that order and see if your communication process order, the act, feel, think order of your current profile, your new Retaking profile, whether that seems to fit you better than the one you had before. Or it may simply give you an insight into my process has changed some. Maybe my emotions are more in play than they used to be. Or maybe I'm being more thoughtful when I didn't used to be. Those kinds of insights can be very valuable to you in understanding how your communication has grown and what other steps you need to take now to move further towards communication mastery, where we become more fluent in all 7 of the communication styles. Fifth thing to ask yourself as you compare your current profile with your previous one is, have any of my closest relationships changed at all? Maybe I've got a new manager at work. Maybe I've got different neighbors in my neighborhood. Maybe a family member has had a health issue or has changed their job. There's been a change in my closest relationships, because every one of those relationships will have an impact to some extent on your communication style. Because our goal, if you remember, is to adapt to one another so that we can communicate, build community, build team, work more effectively together, and be beneficial to one another. So you're not an island, and you're not going to stay static in your communication style if your relationships and your sense of community is going to be healthy. And then the final question to compare profiles would be, how have I changed since the last time that I took the profile? If you're a regular listener to the podcast, you'll have heard me tell the story of a friend of mine who is the CEO of a non-profit. And when I first took him through his profile, his results were very different to what I would have expected. But we worked with the results he had. I knew the guy because I'd worked with him previously before we started coaching. But then 9 months later, we were going to do a workshop for his whole team. And I asked the lead team, who'd done their profiles earlier, to retake their profiles. So we were working with current information. And his profile came back completely different from his first one. It had been about 9 months, I guess. So quite a short time, really. So I went back to him and I said, this was outside of the workshop. I didn't want to expose the guy in front of all his people. But I said to him, well, hey, what's happened here? Your profile's so different. Do you see any explanation for that? And he just simply said to me, well, 9 months of coaching with you has given me permission to be myself. When I answered the first time around, I was answering how I thought the CEO should answer. And now I'm answering as what is true for me as me. And that really gladdened my heart, because none of us is going to succeed in communication if we're pretending or trying to be what we think we should be, rather than understanding how I am wired and what is my uniqueness. And so his effectiveness has increased dramatically because he now sees himself as he truly is, rather than trying to pretend to be something he thinks he ought to be. So those are some of the things that we can look at as we compare the previous profile with the new one. And if you've been more than maybe 18 months to 2 years since you took your profile, then I'd really encourage you to retake it. You can go to my website at markberlinson.com and just click on the Discover My Profile button, and that will take you into the profile again, and it'll give you your current profile results. And then there are some action steps to take after you've compared the two. The first would be to create some intentional processes around the changes that you've identified. So if you see a valuable change in your profile, create a process that will reinforce that change. One that I've been doing recently is that my coach had me develop some personal identity statements that I really need to remember for myself and reaffirm for myself how I'm wired, what I bring to the table. One of which would be that I live to make others successful. And what I did to create an intentional process around that was to put them on a sheet of paper that I have in front of me while I'm exercising. And so I want to exercise regularly, and now I'm rehearsing and reminding myself of my identity statements while I'm exercising. So if you like, I'm building health as well as building healthy identity. Another thing that you can do when you identify a positive change in your profile is to select a setting that's going to benefit from your new profile and focus on those benefits. For example, if your shaper language has increased in your profile, then look for situations and settings in your life and that they'd be different for each of us, but maybe it's something at work, maybe it's something in your hobbies where being able to be more strategic is going to be beneficial. Lean into that so that you're creating an outlet for the change that's happened in the way that you communicate. And then third thing you can do as an action step is to note any new essential qualities to develop that will really help you as you lean into a strengthened language in your profile. So to use the example we just used, where your shaper language is increased, you're looking for settings where you can be more strategic, have more of a global overview of things, and figure out the steps to get to new goals in more effective ways. All of that goes with the shaper language increasing. But one of the things that language needs as an essential quality to develop is to focus on the people as well as the plan. Or to give you a different example, if your doer language has increased and you love to get things done more than you used to, or you're able to see things that need doing more than you used to, then to increase your ability to delegate to others, to bring others into the job, to understand that there's not just the doer way to get things done, but others have other ways to get the same thing done, to gradually increase that ability to delegate is an essential quality to develop that will make your new profile even more healthy. So I hope all of those ideas will help you as you retake your profile. And if your profile's a little older, as I say, I'd encourage you to retake it. markberlinson.com/discover is a direct link that will take you to the place on my website where you can do that. And then I'd be glad to chat with you about the changes you see and how you can leverage them to be even more effective in your communication mastery. That's it for this week. Stick around and we'll see you next week.